Joy, thank you for getting us started with the brief meditation. I don't know if you meant for that, but I appreciate it, and I think it is a good word for us to remember and to maybe look for or allow, is that as we water others, that we receive watering ourselves and receive that blessing, because it is challenging work, as all you know. I'm on several, like Association for Professional Chaplains and ACPE and Association for Clinical Pastoral Education, as I'm members of both of those groups, and the toll on chaplains is significant, as it is with all healthcare providers. And I think of a second-year resident who was there at the VA this fall, who was in Corpus Christi, and he had to be with so many families of loved ones who had died. And then he got COVID, and I got very, very sick. But it was just, he came for the second-year residency just burnt out. So it's very real, and it's very real for you all, as it is for any of us and all the healthcare workers. So I thought I'd start out with a couple questions to kind of get us in the room, and so you'd share your name, your spiritual identity, i.e. faith group, denomination, place of spiritual centering, etc. And so again, my name is Garrett Starmer. I'm Presbyterian by background, though I grew up in the Episcopal Church. And I've been working interfaith now for the last 25, 30 years. So I'll say, Roger.
Sorry, I had to find the unmute. I'm Roger, and I find my way into the nearer presence of God through the liturgy and traditions of the Episcopal Church. And that's it.
And name somebody else.
Alan?
My name is Alan, and I too find myself grounded and closest to God in worship and liturgy of the Episcopal Church. Bill.
Thank you, Alan. My name is Bill, and I'm associated with the Catholic faith at St. John the Baptist here in Chico and St. James in Durham. And what brought a smile to my face was the little Christmas pageant that was put on by elementary school youngsters. And they dropped the doll of the baby Jesus, and two of them looked at their parents and started crying, and the parents went up to reassure them that the baby Jesus was okay, and everybody, the youngsters in the group, had to kiss the baby Jesus to make sure he was okay.
Oh.
And we lost one camel that was broken. So we've got one camel and two donkeys and a couple of sheep left.
And a suffering Jesus.
And a suffering Jesus. They wanted to put on a Band-Aid, but there wasn't one in the church.
So name somebody else, Bill.
Jamie, please.
Jamie Holmes, and I've grown up in a variety of evangelical denominations, thanks to a Mennonite mother, but have landed with the evangelical Lutherans. So a member of Faith Lutheran here in Chico. Did you want us to answer the questions now, Garrett, or do you want to save those for another?
Yeah, we'll just answer this first question, then we'll go and answer the next questions.
Yeah, okay.
My apologies.
You're just ahead of the time, Bill.
Okay.
Let's hear from Carolyn.
Oh, you're muted, Carolyn.
I'm Carolyn Ayers, and I'm non-denominational. I smiled the whole Christmas period, being so happy to be with my family, with us all feeling well and in good spirits. And it just brought a smile to my face the whole time. That's it. And I will say, well, who I can see here is Judy. So Judy.
Oh, Judy, you're muted.
How's that?
Good.
Okay. I'm Judy, and I'm joining the rest of the Episcopal Fellows there. I grew up in the Episcopal Church and still love the liturgy and feel very close to God there. But I also go to the Bidwell Presbyterian Church, so I'm kind of half and half. Well, really, maybe 3/4 Episcopalian and 1/4 Presbyterian.
Okay, Judy, name somebody else.
Oh, let's see, is Nancy around?
Yes, my name is Nancy Smith. My spiritual identity is Tibetan Buddhist. Place of spiritual centering is through meditation and through the Sangha, the community of Buddhists that I meditate with. And David.
My name is David. I was brought up Baptist and became a scientist. I'm a scientist by profession and currently also a minister of the Congregational Church in Paradise and find my centering in nature. And who's left?
Helene.
Helene.
I'm Helene Ginsberg, and I'm Jewish and belong to Congregation Beth Israel. I've been a member for 36 years. And my place of spiritual centering is in music and song.
Am I the last one? Maureen? I can go. I was raised Roman Catholic, spent most of my life as a Roman Catholic and went to the Episcopal Church about 15 years ago. I have a lot of respect for both traditions. My biggest smile on my face was on Christmas morning when my husband arranged for our son to come for Christmas. It was a surprise, and I hadn't seen him much over the last couple of years, so I actually cried. I didn't smile. I was really, really happy. So thank you.
So I know at least a couple other people who haven't. Steve?
I'm Steve Margolin, and I am the Chazan or cantor of Congregation Beth Israel in Chico, so I am Jewish. I find my spiritual center most days by walking about 8/10 of a mile from my house to a creek and back. And I bird watch and I co-lead the community with Reb Lisa Rappaport, and I actively lead the liturgy, and I teach adults and bar and bat mitzvah students.
Great. I think, Joy, you're the last. The first will be the last will be first.
All right, I'm Joy, and I was raised in a Methodist and then First Christian church. Went to Bible college through the First Christian, but I've been involved in lots of different, either non-denominational or denomination, and I find my spiritual centering both in nature and in worship, but particularly music. And I've been on a bunch of praise teams. I play keyboard, and at home, that's what I do a lot to engage in the presence of God, is through worshipful music. And I'm currently involved in an online church with a pastor that I used to babysit for when we were in our 20s, and now we're in our 60s, and he and his son are the ministers, and they're in Eugene, Oregon, but they have a nice online thing, and so I joined with them. I went to Israel and got baptized in the Jordan River with this pastor. And so I have a long relationship with this church. So the online thing is really cool for me, but it definitely has its lacks.
Anybody else who'd like to share? All right,
Nate's being silent. I don't know if he knows that he's invited or not.
oh, yeah, I didn't want to put him on the spot. That's why I went broad and said anybody else. I knew that he hadn't shared, but you put him on the spot, so good.
That's my job.
Thank you, Joy. Yeah, I'm Nate Allen, and I guess my
Recording in progress.
oh, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't have a church that I go to regularly now, but I was, you know, I kind of went around to a bunch of different churches. I moved a lot as a kid, and I went to a friend's church. I went to a Southern Baptist church for a while, and then my home church for a long time when I was like in high school was an Assembly of God church in Shreveport, Louisiana. So yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Great.
I just have to comment that when I asked Nate why he's so normal, when he tells me about his background, he says it was the church upbringing. The grounding of the church, the grounding of the faith, I should say, right? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
So I didn't share where spiritual centering. I like the way you all got to the question. I think the way I asked the question invited that, but it wasn't my intention. But I like it. So my spiritual centering is in prayer life, also being out and just appreciating all the gifts and nature and relationships. But it's in regular connection. I also regularly read Richard Rohr's and materials. I like a lot of it. I don't like some of it, but that's kind of the way it is. So some of you have answered this question already, but we're going to combine the two. For those of you who haven't answered, you can answer. One is what brought you a smile to your face in these holidays, and the other is share a relational connection that you experienced over the last 2 weeks that you felt good about. With whom? So a smile to my face was Zooming for Christmas presents opening with our grandkids. So these grandkids we were going to be with on Tuesday before Christmas, they came down with COVID, or a couple of them. So that shopped the idea that we would be together in person. And we were in Gig Harbor. So then Melissa, my wife, and I then drove down on the 23rd, but Zooming with them and just seeing them, they're happy family, and we're so blessed to have them. Oldest is 17, youngest is 10. That brought a smile to my face. And a relational connection is, I've got a best friend from 7th grade, who I spent New Year's with But there's more connections. He's actually my brother-in-law now, as of the last 13 years. So my wife and his wife are sisters. Anyway, we took some bike rides and just hung out together. And I'm very thankful for that relationship. And so now I'm going to name Judy.
Judy, did you say Judy? Am I on?
You are.
Okay. What made me smile? Well, you know, I have a pile of grandkids, and I got to spend the Christmas Eve day with some of them, grandchildren and great grandchildren, and the two little ones. I couldn't stop smiling because they're just so precious, and they were so into their gifts and the people around them. And Hazley's actually 2.5, and she'll just talk your head off. You can't understand hardly anything she says, but she's very animated, and you just can't help smiling. So they were very dear. As far as relationships go, I think, well, I had a great New Year's Eve with my close family that I lived here with, my daughter and my 2 granddaughters and their friends. And we had really a great celebration. That's as far as my bubble goes, because I don't really get out of my bubble in these times. And so anyway, yeah, that's great.
Okay.
I'm gonna call on, are you calling or should I call on the next person?
You call on the next person.
Okay, Alan.
Thank you, Judy. I think there were many things that brought a smile to my face, but one particular one was on 4 Advent, so the week before Christmas. We had a Christmas pageant at St. John's, and it was great to see a ton of kids. You know, we've had this, you know, sort of dearth of little ones at church, and it was just really charming to see the ones dressed up as, you know, sheep and donkeys and whatnot, and you know, the typical you know, chaos that occurs. And it was just great to see that innocence and energy that happens. And I think for relationship, I think for my wife and I, it was particularly poignant, and it was great we had a great New Year's and Christmas. And unfortunately, our daughter came down with COVID. Thankfully, I tested negative. We both did, but we had a really nice Christmas together. So I'd say that was my, you know, connection, and it was great. Steve.
Lots of things have brought me smiles, but the one that jumped right into my head was on Christmas morning. I listened to the recorded version of the Ceremony of Lessons and Carols from King's College, Cambridge, from the night before, and the sound of the choir in that space always makes me smile. And particularly the beginning of the first carol, when the chosen boy soprano begins to sing. I'm a sucker for liturgy of all sorts, and that made me smile. A relational something in the last few weeks. A daughter named Claire, who lives in the Bay Area, who we haven't seen now in a number of years, in part because of COVID. And she's now 17. So this is the first year that we've been able to just pick out books and send them to her and her mother for Christmas and let them fight it out, who was going to read what. We visited with them on Zoom on Christmas Eve, I think, before they headed to the East Coast for more of their celebration. So that was much fun.
I'll name somebody else. Looks like
I'll go on, Roger.
A smile and a tear. Christmas Eve service, the last carol before the recessional is Silent Night. And the tradition is to give candles to everyone in the congregation and to extinguish the lights, to sing Silent Night, and the third verse sung a cappella. And it gets me every year. And I have a budding new friendship upon my return from my holiday at the coast, and both thrilled and terrified at the same time. So we'll see how that goes. And Carolyn, you're muted.
You're muted, Carolyn.
Well, what I said when you couldn't hear was so brilliant that I can't think what it was. Anyway, I've been reading in many places and over the years. I mean, it's sort of an is, and I'm fascinated with it. And it has to do with the innocence, the beautiful innocence of children. And the invitation is for us to try to find some of that innocence and act in the world with this innocence. And just recently, I went with my daughter and her husband down to visit their grandchild, which is my great-grandchild, and she's 5. And we were there for maybe 3 hours. And I was delighted just to watch the innocence of that child, being tuned into that thought and listening to her spontaneous responses and her no judgment, open heart, just giving and loving. It was really a wonderful experience. So that's it. Nancy?
Thank you, Carolyn. I was thinking what I might say, and I might say on Christmas Day, as you probably know, I was the person going into the hospital. And when I was getting ready to go, I said, oh, it'd be nice if I had something to take to people. And so I thought, oh, maybe a Christmas card. So I looked at my Christmas cards and they all said, happy joy, and you know, everything's bright and cheery and everything. And I said, nah, that's not really appropriate, you know, for people who are sick in the hospital. So I decided what I would do is give them a book of inspirations, our prayers and inspirations. So, and as we have said, and as recently as today, is like what we give, we get so much more back. And I truly have to say that I got a lot out of the experience of being with these people on Christmas Day who couldn't be with their families. Clearly, one person was totally bummed out. His family was not vaccinated, so they could not visit with him. Another woman was related just one series of events after another, how she had been in care homes and that her husband asked for a divorce and her son had committed suicide. And it was just like pile on this poor woman. And so just the opportunity to be with these people was a reward for me and something that made me feel good. It made me feel good to be with them at a time when others couldn't be with them. And then another joyful thing was that my brother and sister-in-law came up for New Year's, and I taught them how to play Mexican Train, and I won every time. And and then following that, my Buddhist organization had a winter retreat. And just 5 days of meditation, listening to teachers, and talking a lot about open heart, kindness, equanimity. And it's all these things that I look at this gallery and I see all of you representing that. So thank you.
Nancy, would you want to name somebody else? And you're muted.
Let's see, Jamie and Dobie.
Yes. Yeah, he's pretty chilling today. Something that really brought a smile to my face recently was the gift that Santa Claus brought my husband, Ralph. He told me to tell Santa that he wanted this particular gift. And I said, well, it's really out of our budget for Christmas gifts. And then I went back 5 days later and bought it. So he was so surprised. And it was just wonderful. Just, it's like giving a gift to a little kid. Let's see, have we heard from David yet on these questions?
Yes, thank you. We used to live in Colorado and particularly used to live in Grand Lake. And so we were able to tune in to their streaming Christmas Eve service. David Heil was the minister. It brought back memories year after year after year of candlelight services, walking between the Presbyterian Church and the Catholic Church, the whole thing. And that was very meaningful for my wife and myself. Then we tuned into our grandkids, and I asked my grandson, whose name is Jake, I said, I have to give a sermon on the topic of the Word became flesh. And I said, what does that mean? And of course, at 16, he could explain the whole thing to me, including parts I have never heard about. But it was such a neat conversation that I went away blessed from that. Thank you.
And name someone else.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. Let's see. Have we heard from Helene?
Not yet. I think what brought a smile to my face was the generosity of all of my neighbors who put up their Christmas lights, because this is a season of light. And they put on an especially beautiful display this year. And I really appreciate the feeling behind that, that it's a very communal act and they want to share with us, with all of us, their joy. And probably a little bit of competition, but that can be a healthy impulse as well. So I really, that brought me great joy as well. And are we going on to the interpersonal?
Yes.
Contact, the connection. During the season between Christmas and New Year's, I was able to have dinner with a very old friend in Chico, 30+ year friendship, who I haven't been able to see very much because of COVID and her work. And we just picked up where we left off. And that's always just such a great feeling, the continuity of love and friendship. So that really, really touched me.
Nice. Can you name somebody? All right, Maureen.
Well, a laugh, always the grandkids are great for a laugh. Probably my biggest laugh was the pageant. Two of the sheep were my own grandchildren, and they were hilarious as they tried to negotiate what it's like to be a little lamb at Jesus's birth. And then as far as relationship things, kind of bittersweet, but my husband's really struggling because he came here to farm 10 years ago, and we have with tariff wars and water issues and COVID, he's really thinking that this goal that he had of being able to farm is not viable, and really been a difficult time for him. And we had a lot of conversations over Christmas, you know, a little fewer commitments, meetings and such. And it was very nice to get a little bit closer and for him to feel more comfortable that I was okay with, you know, however he wanted to go with that. And so that was a good thing.
Thank you for sharing that. I think maybe everybody's gone except Joy.
So probably like many people here, Christmas is a season that I'm just happy to get through without anything major bad going on. And what made me smile though is the weather. It's rained and it snowed. I don't know if anybody got to play in the snow, but I got to connect with a friend of mine, Dr. Sheryl El-Dubra. She and I went up and skied around Paradise Lake. There was enough snow to ski around there. And but the connection, I would say, is really, as you guys know, my stepmother died last summer unexpectedly, and I've been spending a lot of time caretaking my dad. And he's been very bitter towards God and the church. I would say more the church than God, but it's really distanced him, I think, from his former spiritual closeness that he used to have. And so it was very painful something in the church happened that was very painful for him, and he never went back. And so he and I have been talking a little bit about that, and just kind of connecting on a different level, talking real stuff about grief and, you know, how mean his wife was, but yet she was his wife, and he really misses her, even though she really caused him and a lot of other people pain. And so it's kind of a deep connection that's both painful and joyous at the same time.
Thank you. I appreciate that you have that. I think everybody shared. Is there somebody who hasn't shared? So I just want to share a little bit of why I have us do this. Because I think some of you have underscored it, is we're a community. And we're a community that has all the joys and sorrows and struggles and connections that any other group of 15, 16 people would have. And as a community, if we know one another at those levels versus just passing one another, signing in or something, we start knowing one another's, as my term, brothers and sisters of faith or spirituality. And that can help water us, as well as, I guess, help water us and kind of keep us going with the hard work and ministries that we're doing. And so thank you all for being willing to share as you did today and last week. We're gonna move on now. And so Nate, if you will go to the next slide. So this is, before we actually move on to what we're going to specifically talk about this week, is any reactions, thoughts, contemplations, questions do you have from our meeting 2 weeks ago, or I guess it's 3 weeks ago now?
That was like a year ago.
It was last year, indeed. Janie?
You know, as I thought about that meeting afterwards, I was just so proud of us as a bunch of volunteers. The questions were very thoughtful, and I thought it was really a good experience for us to be invited to think about them and how reflective we all are about this. We are all called to this ministry in some way, and I really appreciate that, and being part of this group.
Thank you. Yeah, Carolyn.
The last time I was at the hospital with Nancy, I really started to get this feeling. And then when I had coffee with someone this morning, I verbalized it because I wanted her to understand. I told her that I was in training to be a volunteer at the hospital in the area of spiritual support. And it came about, these thoughts. Of course, all of you have them, but I'm new and I'm just collecting these thoughts. But after the last time we met with you, Garrett, this started to really, not just in my head, but I started to feel the closeness of the people in this group and their support of each other and the non-judgmental way they are about each other's religions. And I told my friend at coffee this morning, I said, actually, this is like what a little mini world, what the world should be like, is that we have our own preferences, but that we respect the preferences of others. And I've wanted this, actually, this feeling my whole life. I realize as I see all the dissension between religions and that kind of thing, and I'm thinking, I have been blessed to come into a group where there are all these religions and all of this respect. It's just almost like take in. It's just something I wanted, and I didn't know there was even anything like that in the world. And here it is, and I'm a part of it.
Carolyn, thanks. It's pretty amazing. Anybody else? Not everybody has to share. Oh, go ahead, Carolyn.
It's okay. I was thinking I had to choose somebody.
Oh, no, you don't have to choose anybody. This is just if people want to share, we're not going to go around and have everybody share. Okay, well, we can keep that open too. And you can always email me and all of us if you'd like to further discuss. So why don't we go to the next slide. So when I was working for Centura Health, which is a combination of Catholic and Adventist hospitals on the Front Range of Colorado, 14 hospitals plus a number of senior care facilities and hospices. So we were bringing in electronic medical records. And so we had the task of building a spiritual chart system. So how to chart basically for the chaplains. And so we met for we being about 12 of us, both certified educator, chaplains, and department heads and chaplains in the different facilities. There's probably 30 or 40 chaplains in that group, but 8 to 12 of us were tasked with developing this chart system. And so in doing that, we started thinking, okay, what is really the anatomy of a spiritual care visit? And so this is the anatomy of a spiritual care visit that we finalized in 2009. Not all of it I completely agree with right now, or there's more things I would add, some things I'd take away, and I actually did a little bit of that as I was preparing, but not a lot. But we were the Centura chaplains, 2009. And if you see through the ages, So you know what, I'm choosing to see all of you and not the screen. And oh, here we go, through the ages. So this is just a group of people who or different individuals who influenced our thinking, everything from Anton Boysen. Some of you have heard of him, some of you haven't. He was the father of the spiritual care movement in the mid-20s. I could talk about each one of these people. I'm not going to, but you see that we based a lot of our both research and then what we put together on many of these people who had influence in the pastoral care movement in one way or another. So next slide. So what we were doing, and this is based on Art Lucas's The Discipline for Pastoral Care Visits. Actually, that's not The Discipline for Pastoral Care Giving. Art Lucas, he was actually a friend of mine, a certified educator, director of spiritual care at Barnes Jewish in St. Louis. I think I mentioned it last time. Anyway, he put this together, this general format. We adapted what we did from many of his writings, but the idea was we provide a full circle spiritual care. When we provide full circle spiritual care, we're offering to walk with another person from a needs-based problems to resource-based outcomes, all within a spiritual and theological foundation context. So let me just highlight two words. Often in medicine or psychology or spirituality, we look for only problems. What's the struggle? Which is very important to understand the struggle. But what we've left out is what are the resources? What are the resources people have? So it's a balance of this, of the struggles and the resources. So let me give you a quick example, because I'm going to have a hip surgery here I'm going to get a new hip sometime in the next month or so. But if I was 35, or maybe even now, but I could certainly say 35, I fell and broke my hip. The doc would say, okay, we can fix that, great. Because I had resources of health, youth, good physical shape, active, et cetera, et cetera. So those are all resources that the doc considers. If I was 85 and fell and broke my hip, I wouldn't have necessarily the health, the ability to recover, et cetera. And many of us know that if you're 85 and you break your hip, that's often the step when people go into an assisted living and will soon die within 6 months to 5 years or something. It's kind of the mark of decline. But the doc is looking at both our resources, a 35-year-old who breaks his hip or an 85-year-old, and treats them very differently. So as we look at and are with patients, staff, loved ones, what we came up with and what I believe is to not only look at the problem, but look at the resources the person has and to be aware of those. And so when we talk about outcome oriented, I could go in more into that. I'm not going to go a whole lot into that, but it's just an awareness that there is a difference that spiritual care makes in people's lives. So when we were training, on to the next slide. So actually, I'm sorry, Nate, the previous slide. Yeah. You see there's 5 areas here. There's rapport building. Again, we're doing an anatomy of a spiritual care visit. Rapport building, assessment, spiritual care plan, intervention, outcome and evaluation. So, and again, we charted and everything, so it's a little more in depth than what we're doing here as volunteers, but I think it's still can be helpful to understand the broader view. And so we had these retreats where we had 30, 40 chaplains, and we were leading this, and we got a beach ball. And on the beach ball, you know how beach balls have different colors, and then white and different colors. They've got different sections. So we put like rapport building on one section, on another section assessment, on another section spiritual care plan, another section intervention, another section outcome evaluation. We probably had 5 or 10 of those and just started throwing them up in the room. And what we were trying to illustrate was that these are all these 5 areas are things that we're doing, and it's not linear. The way we have to explain it is linear, but it's not a linear concept. So when I go into a room, I'm assessing right away. So are the curtains closed? Is the person in fetal position? Are there a variety of flowers and cards and pictures? All of that is part of my assessment. So all of you, just like me, are assessing from the very beginning. We're also rapport building from the beginning. We also might be making a general plan, spiritual care plan. I wonder why the curtains are closed and this person's in fetal position. Wonder what's going on. Or on the other example, I wonder how this illness is affecting, well, in both situations, affecting this person who's got the curtains open and flowers and pictures. I wonder what this is like for her or him. So again, we're doing all of these at the same time. So in the next slide now, our full circle spinning care. Nate? Anyway, I'll explain it and we'll come up with that. Oh, here we go. We're constantly moving through the 5 phases of full circle spiritual care. And again, I list the 5, I don't need to list them again, but they require a variety of skills. And, you know, if you look at a good gymnast, how easy that makes it look. I mean, they can just do amazing things. And it just looks so easy. A good spiritual care provider, or when we're doing our best work, it makes it look very easy. But that's not to say it is easy, because there are so many different skills needed and things that we are evaluating all at the same time. And you all are doing it naturally, and you're also, and I'm doing it naturally, and I'm also learning about it and also sharing that. So it takes engaged communication, focus and active listening, understanding, acceptance of the process that you're going through or the patient's going through, all that. Intuition, using our intuition, both our spiritual intuition and our personal intuition, if you can make a separation. Our curiosity in a positive way. I wonder what this meaning of this illness is with this person who's got so much family around, or wondering, wonder what this family's like. Critical thinking, creativity. I think of this, a couple people I've had who are artists, and this one woman who she's now palliative care chaplain in Seattle. But she would take in with certain patients some drawing, her colored pencils, and the person would start sharing about what's going on with her. I think it was her spiritually through the drawing. She also brought that into the mental health small group that she had on the mental health unit in a different way. But creativity can be something like that. Creativity can be also using our curiosity. Maybe it's time to be quiet now, or maybe it's time to move in a different direction. There's a creative part of that. Self-awareness and reflection. I think this is vital. You'll hear me going over this over and over again. It's part of my professional bias, and I own it, appreciate it, and will defend it, but I know it's not the only perspective. So to know what's going on with ourselves helps us to know what's going on with the patient. It also helps us to be fully there for the patient and not there for ourselves. So the self-awareness and ability to reflect on that, and then again, focus, presence, mindfulness is part of that. Okay, next. And I'm not going to be lecturing the whole time, just to let you know. This is this is just a start. So one of the guys who, it was men and women, but one of the people who put this together 2008, 2009, Steve Gomes is a certified educator. And he put it in a very linear fashion. As you see, the first thing before anything else is you got to show up. You got to walk in that room, or you got to think about it. And then you need to be present. If you're thinking about, oh, I got to pay that bill, or that other patient is your primary thought, you're not showing up and you're not being present. You got to engage. You got to listen to the person's story. And when I say you got to, we got it. We're listening for emotions and feelings as well as objective content. And all of that is an important part of being with the patient and being helpful to the patient. And having empathy, putting ourselves in the person's shoes. So Nate, if you go to the next rapport building. So we're going to first look at rapport building. And then the next one where the circle. This is hard because again, like I said, I'm choosing to see your faces more than I am which slides up. So, and then I've got my own cheat sheet here. So now we're looking at the anatomy that we put together of the visit. There's one of 5 areas, and rapport building is the first one. And so now we're going to go into a little depth on each one of these 5. So showing up, and I want, as I read these and discuss them a little bit, I want you to think about what you think about in showing up, because we're going to have, after I read these, we're going to have a time for you all to share briefly what you think about when you think about just showing up. So the first, again, in personal reflection, are what agenda do I have? Where are my emotions? What thoughts do I bring? Okay, this is an 85-year-old who has just broken their hip. Okay, I've already got that person in the grave in 3 to 5 years, or 6 months to 5 years. Well, maybe I go in the room and that is a very different person who's laying in that bed. This person might break all the stereotypes. And so to know that I've got that bias as I go in, there's a little ageism in that bias, I hate to acknowledge. Then I can acknowledge that bias to myself and work to be open to not being driven by that bias. So the next thing is spiritual centering before you enter a room. For me, before I enter a room, I'm typically praying, Lord, help me to see what the need is, help me to see what the resources are, help me to be open to what's going on. I've had several students do spiritual centering in different ways. But many of us do that and find that that's an important part of showing up. For me, it's a very important part of showing up. It helps me to get rid of some of the other stuff that's going on. Part of showing up is just deciding who's going to be the person that you focus on. Is it the patient? Is it the loved one? Is it a staff? Might include a referral. It might include, before showing up, checking with the care team and just getting an idea of what's going on with that patient or patients. I typically, when I'm doing direct care, is I've try to develop a strong relationship with staff. So I'll go and check with who's ever charged, or which the nurses who will have and say, hey, any people that you think would be a visit would be helpful for, can you give me some information, or what do I need to know? So, and I also listen to that and take it very seriously, and I take it with a grain of salt, because they all have their biases just like I have my bias. And so I want to listen, and 85% of the time it's exactly so helpful in the visit. And then about 15% of the time, it's about a bias. And anybody who's human is going to have a bias, and especially if you're direct care on the bedside where you've been maybe 12 hours for 2 days and you're on your third day of 12s, you're exhausted, and a patient is just annoying, you're going to hear that bias. But I've also experienced over and over again, when you actually visit that patient, that patient might not deserve that bias. And if I can go in open, that's very helpful. So then you're assessing at some level spiritual acuity. Now, typically, that's kind of an advanced thing, words, don't worry about that. But again, what are the strengths and what are the concerns, as I talked about before? And then we just put together, we being the Centura chaplains, 5 levels of concern. I mean, 3 levels. Are they in distress, spiritual distress? Are they in despair? Are they in spiritual crisis? And I just saw bias that we were working against. Do they have strong resources? Are they actually, are they seeing this as a time of deep growth, even though they're had a surgery or have COVID or something else? And then which need or resource is a priority to maybe check in with them about. And typically I don't go after that in the first visit. Sometimes I do. When I say go after that, I'm not talking about go after that aggressively. I'm talking about lift that up. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's just a matter of continuing to do the other 4 things that I'll describe pretty soon. Again, assess the timing. Can't tell me how many times I've gone in a room and somebody's on the pot. That's not a typically good time to visit somebody. Yeah. So I gave an extreme. But then also I'm assessing the caregiver's needs, the nurses, the techs, those people around as well. And I'm keeping that in my mind and say, I'm going to check back with that nurse. I'm going to check back with that RT, respiratory therapist, because I think there's something going on there. Or maybe, boy, I connect with that person. I would like to continue to connect. I can see that we could make a partnership as I visit patients. Okay, so I listed a bunch of showing up ideas. What did I miss? What did I and the Centura chaplains miss as far as when you think of showing up? I think it's so wonderful when we're so brilliant that we didn't miss anything. So thank you. Okay, give me 1 or 2 or 3 things that you think about when showing up that's important.
To some degree, I think you have to make sure your own needs are met, that you've gotten something to eat, you've had a little water, that you sit down when you get tired.
Excellent. Yeah, how are you doing? Are you fueled up? Are you, yeah, that excellent. In order to, that goes akin to my own thoughts, as being aware of what's going on with yourself. And if you need food, most definitely. Anything else? Okay, I'm going to move to the next slide. You can be thinking about this. The next is being present. And again, there's overlap on all of these. This was just our way of trying to get at the basics of what we do. So there's nothing sacred about these different categories, but being present, attending to the person's needs rather than my own thoughts, feelings, or my need to minister, help, fix. So many of us in the helping professions love to be helpful. Being helpful is why we're there. And it can also, if we're not aware of that need, that can drive our visit in a way that we are so convinced of how we can be helpful, we're not hearing what's going on with the patient. And so that's being aware of, where are my needs? And if we're really, maybe we're feeling bad and we have or I need a good visit because I feel like poop. To be aware, okay, how can I work within myself to find my own resources as I go in, so I don't need the patient to fill that resource for me. And I somewhat hesitate to say that. And the somewhat hesitation is that at the same time, we do get something out of it. And that's wonderful. It's a matter, it's that tension is that driving the visit? Or is it not driving the visit and we can be completely open to the person? But it takes us being aware of our own need to maybe get achievement, accomplishment, getting an attaboy from the patient, or to know where is that in relationship to actually helping the patient. Active versus passive presence. So I cannot say anything in a visit or say very little and being actively present. So my definition of active presence is being totally focused on the need in the room. Well, not totally. Focused primarily on the need of the room while also being aware of my own needs. And so they talk about a hip. And so I automatically go 85-year-old hip. Oh, it reminds me of my grandmother when she died, but she didn't die from a hip. But that's the example I'm giving. So what can look passive, our role from my perspective is in that room is really being focused on what are the needs and resources in that room of that person, of that family. Present for whom? So there might be a patient, family, staff, etc. So who's really has the need at this point? Sometimes it's not the patient. Sometimes it's the loved ones who's sitting at the side of the bed. Doesn't mean to ignore that patient, but just to be aware of, what I think at this point in my visit, my focus needs to be on listening to that caregiver. Very simply, who's available to engage? Sometimes the patient might be asleep, so you do talk to the caregiver. What are the relational dynamics? Now, we all know enough that relationships have dynamics. Families have dynamics. We don't know if, say, there's a loved one there, if they've just had a major fight. We don't know if they've just lost somebody and are grieving. We don't know any of that. So being aware that we don't know, but being open to what is. And then self-assessment. What's competing for my attention? I think it was Carolyn mentioned going to the cafeteria. Am I hungry and I just want to go eat? I'm starving. Or again, okay, this 85-year-old patient who's broken his hip. What's competing is my grandfather who broke his hip and what that was like for me at 15 when he went into the hospital and then was never able to live independently again. Again, I'm making that up as far as that example, but it's it's a very possible one. What else is going on with me and or with the person? So that, again, being as open as we can to what's going on with ourselves, what's going on with the patient, what's going on in the room, and what's going on with the staff. Because as I mentioned before, there might be either a positive or a negative bias by the staff towards that patient, or maybe the staff is just running ragged. They're all just exhausted, and they want to get to the patients and they can't, so they feel bad about themselves, they feel exhausted, they feel pissed off at the institution, you know, and that's going to affect everything. So being aware of that. So any other thoughts on being present? Yeah, Nancy.
I think going back to the previous slide is when you're standing outside the door is as having no sense of time. You don't know how long your visit's going to take. So you can't be rushed, you can't be harried about the thing. Sometimes we have a full list of patients to see, but one patient might take more time than another. So we have to be aware of that as well. No sense of urgency in leaving the room.
Very excellent. There's always that not always, there's often that tension between, do I see more patients or do I focus on the need in front of me? And that's a major struggle with chaplains throughout the country, is knowing how to negotiate that. And there are times to put away that long list and just sit and be with one person for 45 minutes, an hour sometimes. And there's times to cut off the visit. I've often said to my students, I can get into a room and leave a room very quickly if I want, and still have the person feel like I cared about them. So there's an art of leaving a room, but being aware of, there's also an art of staying, and when do you stay? So thank you. Anybody else for being present?
Jared,
Okay.
I think we
Yes.
need to be.
Yeah, Stephen?
We need to be very careful about body language and eye contact things, because if you look away for a moment and you look at your watch, or you look at the clock in the room, or you look out the window, that can easily be interpreted as you checked out.
Excellent. Yeah, we're just like we're watching the patient or the loved one, they're watching us. And we've all heard that communication is somewhere between 70 and 90% nonverbal. It's our body language. And so, yeah, being aware of what we're doing, our body language is very important. So, you know, this is really important to me, and let's see, what time is it? Okay, I just tried to illustrate in a kind of a poor way what Steve was saying. In other words, you aren't important to me because I'm looking at my watch instead of being fully with you. Okay, let's go on to engaging. So it's not easy to engage somebody who's sick. It's not easy to engage a stranger often anyway. So suddenly we are in a situation, they don't know if they want to see us. We want to see them, but we don't know what that's going to be like. But to start to think about, how can I engage this person? And knowing that in one room you might have somebody who's loves spiritual care providers. The next room you might have somebody who is so weary of anything related to religion. Or sometimes you have religious types who the last thing they want to do is talk to a religious leader. So we don't know who we're going to see, but what's a relational way to connect with that patient family? How can I connect with them? And it goes with everything we've talked about, the body language, etc. How can I engage with that family and actually ideally switch the situation so it's not me engaging as much as inviting them to lead the conversation. And again, this is part of what takes a skill, but you all probably do this in your life with friends or spouses or loved ones or acquaintances, neighbors. You connect with that person, you find a way to engage. And then sometimes you go, boy, I really want to hear more about them. How do I invite them to share more without seeming like I'm snooping or they're a project for me? And it's a challenge, but I believe that we all do that in other areas. And it's a matter of continuing to hone those skills in this visit. So anything else about engaging?
Sorry.
Yeah, Nancy.
I found of late that the whiteboards in the patient's room or the paper that's behind their bed that shows their interests have been filled out a lot. So you find out they have a cat, you find out they have a dog, you find out they have grandchildren. And those are very helpful to initiate a conversation. So just throw that in.
That's excellent. That's again, those whiteboards give so much immediate information that can be so helpful and can help us as a conversation starter. Anything else as far as engaging? Yeah, Jeannie.
Loretta tells a story of a patient who just had been in the hospital a long time and just did not want to talk about anything medical or spiritual. She needed some respite and wanted to talk about how much she loved her pet. And that, I think, was good spiritual care.
For so many people, their major attachment is their pet or pets. And so you're exactly right, Jamie. It is a spiritual part of their life and a very important spiritual part of their life. Anybody else? Yeah, Roger. Roger, you're muted.
Thank you. I overheard nurses at the nurses station on 1 South complaining about a patient down the hall, how difficult she was, and so forth. I was new to chaplaincy, so I had no fear, and I decided I was going to go down and find out what I could. And I interacted with the patient and didn't particularly encounter the antagonism. And it occurred to me to ask, so when you're not lying in a hospital, what do you do? And she said, I'm an author and I'm writing a book, and this hospital stay is interrupted my creative process, and I'm very frustrated, and I want to get home so I can continue my work and so forth. And after the visit, I went down the hall, and to those nurses, I said, she's an author, and being in here has disrupted her creative process. She's working on a book. Next day, I'm back and the nurses say, Roger, it's amazing. We went down and saw that patient again and asked about her book, and it just transformed the relationship. And we were able to hear what she was doing and so forth. And now she's cooperating and what have you. And it was just intentional listening, trying to find what's the hook? What can I learn about this patient that will allow me, and as it turned out, the nursing staff to engage her.
Excellent. So that's going to move us to story listening. You heard her story, Roger. All of us have stories.
Mm-hmm.
All of us have things that bring meaning to us, each one of us. can we hear that with the patient or loved one? So it's being respectfully curious. I'll put respectfully curious versus boy, you're curious about the person's story in their life. What's important to them? Again, an author. I think of a CEO who was just a jerk, and this disrupted his life. Hospitalizations are going to disrupt people's lives, and they can't do what they want. So most patients at some level are going to have some level of both sadness and anger. Okay, so around the person's presented material, so what do they tell us? What's the focus that they're telling us a story about? What's important to follow? And how do you ask open-ended questions? Might be with author. Wow, that's fascinating, you're author. Would you mind sharing what you're writing? And so again, we're trying to get the heart of it, of what's going on with the person. So, and then it's also exploring content, emotions, connections between the two. So people are going to give us content, but they're also, how do their emotions fit with the content that's going on? Or sometimes people seem very, very just flat and are telling us really important stuff. Well, that often means how important it is that they can't feel it. So they've kind of separated it from themselves. So it's also aware that the emotions, that there's going to be emotions present, whether you always experience them or not. Sometimes you can tune into your own emotions. Boy, I'm so sad that you just lost da da da. I'm so sad that you just lost I'm feeling sad because you lost your golden retriever who you had for 12 years, who's been your main companion. And so sometimes it's appropriate to just hear that. I feel sadness. So there's some self-reflection. I mean, some vulnerability there too. So I'm going to go on to identifying emotions and feelings. So I've set you up for this. We're going to take 3 minutes at the most. What's important to identify? Why is it important to identify your emotions and the other person's emotions and feelings? Why is that important?
I always need to know what belongs to me and what belongs to the other person and not get them confused.
Yep. And I can promise you that all of us are going to get those confused at times. And it's a challenge of, okay, sometimes it's backing up. Why is it important to identify emotions and feelings? Somebody else. Yeah, Ellen.
It's not about me.
Yep. Not about you. And as we identify the person's emotions and feelings, we can get a sense of what's important to them. So it's about both. It's not about us. It's about them, but we need to know what ours are as well. So thank you. Somebody else. Identifying emotions and feelings. Why is that important? Nancy?
Well, we also need to make a connection with them. If we don't know what they're going through, then we can't really make a connection with what emotions and feelings they have.
Yep, exactly. The emotions is such a strong connection. And to be able to have empathy for those emotions. So I'm going to move on to empathy. Well, no, first I'm going to read the identifying emotions. Identifying and naming the person's emotions and feelings. Self-awareness about your own. We've touched on all of these. Using your self-awareness to walk with the patient into the issues they're presenting. Could be like I mentioned about the golden retriever. Companioning the patient, loved one, staff within their struggles and joys. So we're not there to fix it. We can't fix it. But we are there to companion and maybe sometimes help them to understand what they're feeling or what's going on with them. more importantly, or what the meaning of this illness is, or et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it's appropriate to get to the heart of the matter, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes when we're just still, sometimes to go, boy, I hear a lot of sadness there, and you look at them real closely, that's the last thing they need at that point in the relationship. Maybe later in the conversation that would be appropriate. So it's not just the feeling, it's really hearing their story and what's important to them. And then now empathizing. Empathizing, you know, the proverb, walking in another person's shoes, moccasins. And we don't know what that loss of the golden retriever is. We don't, the meaning to them, or the broken hip, or getting COVID, or having brain surgery. Can we empathize what it might be? So Kohut, Heinz Kohut says feeling into the person's situation. And it's about empathizing, it's not judging. What's it like for them? That's what I like to think. What's it like for them to be them in the situation? What's it like for them? That kind of, for me, that takes it out of a medical model of analysis. It's, what's it like? Appropriate use of self. Okay, journeying into the experience while being aware of how it touches our own. We've touched on that before. Appropriate use of self. Again, it might be appropriate to say, I feel really sad that you lost your golden retriever. That makes me really sad. Bring in a compassionate objectivity for individual, family, loved ones, caregivers. So that loss of the golden retriever is not my golden retriever that I lost. But I can have empathy what it might be like. I can imaginatively put myself into what that might be like. So, but it's not mine, it's theirs. But with empathy, I can be there. And if it took it on be mine, it might be, I start crying, I'm over exaggerating right now. I start crying, I start thinking about Yeti, who was my lab, who I lost. And suddenly I've lost my objectivity. I can be aware, boy, this reminds me when I lost Yeti. That was devastating to me. But knowing, okay, this isn't about Yeti, this isn't about me. As Alan said earlier, having an objective compassion for what it's like for that person. So I'm going to move us, yeah, Steve.
I either heard or read very recently something that was in the context of race rather than chaplaincy, but it was the problem with the response, I can't imagine what it's like, fill in the blank. Saying that to someone, and the example was a Black man who said he's tired of hearing white people say to him, I can't imagine what it's like to be a Black man in America. He said, yes, you can, just try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's we can only imaginatively put ourselves in the place of that person. And we can do that, but we hold it lightly because our imagination might be very different than what they're experiencing. And so there's a sense of what I regularly talk about as being tentative in our understanding. I think I understand this, but I don't know. I'm just imaginatively putting myself into their situation from my role as a older white guy who's been very privileged all my life. So I don't know what it's like to be a woman. I don't know what it's like to be 30 years old right now. I can only know what it's like to be with who I am. And sometimes I have a trouble even understanding where I am fully. So that's why I journal, but I didn't mention that as far as my spiritual centering, but journal is an important part. So I'm going to move now to any thoughts or questions from what we've talked about. What questions do you have? So that you can move on to additional thoughts. So what questions do you have from this time that we've had? Or comments? Judy, and you're muted.
Okay, all right now?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to say that I think you have absolutely hit just about everything that I have gone through in processing my time in the hospital with patients. All of those feelings, that the emotions and the problems with myself, I think, in dealing with trying to be there for the person that I'm there to see. It's sometimes very hard for me to get between empathy and sympathy. It's one of the things that is more something that I'm usually always thinking about, because I tend to be, and I also tend to involve myself many times saying, oh yeah, I've been through that and I know how that feels. And then get to talking about something that like the dog, like you were talking about. And I really appreciate the fact that you are reminding us, all of us, about the way we should be doing it. And thank you very much.
Good, thank you. Yeah, normal conversation, if somebody talks about, I have this dog, then your normal conversation is, oh, I have this dog. I lost this dog. Oh, I lost it. That's normal conversation.
Right.
I tell my students always what we're doing is countercultural.
Right.
Because yes, I have Yeti, who I mentioned before.
Right.
My focus is on the person. So what's it like for that person? And I can use my experience of loss with my dog, but that doesn't ever have to come in. In fact, that might interrupt, and usually would interrupt, the ability to be there for the patient, the other person.
Absolutely.
Anybody else? Janie?
One thing I would find helpful in another meeting would be to hear the different ways that others go in to start building rapport. What do you say when you first walk in? How do you kind of get established relationally? I've realized since we have the new referral system, and of course referrals get priority, I'm doing fewer and fewer rounds, just sort of cold calls. And the challenge of rounds is this person hasn't invited you into their space yet. So I just would like to hear, in another meeting, how others handle that.
That would be great. Thank you for that. And I think we can do that. Yes, Steve.
If I could jump for just a brief bit of group supervision, if you will. I had walked into a patient's room last week, and it was a referral from charge nurse. And I make eye contact, I introduce myself, and the first thing the patient says to me is, "You look terrified." What do I do with that?
Do you want to role play it with me real quick?
Sure.
Okay, I'm patient. No, I'm you.
Nope,
Okay.
Gabby. Stop it. Stop it.
So you're the chaplain?
I'm the chaplain. I go in and tell me what you,
Well, so
the
introduce
patient
yourself.
just said to you, say to me.
So give me your your half sentence introduction.
I'm sorry?
And give me your half sentence introduction. You walked into the room. What did you say to me?
Well, first of all, just say, okay, you just said you look terrified.
Oh, no, I wanted to go back so that it's very sudden. So go back and introduce yourself to me as you came into the room.
Okay, hi. My name's Garrett. I'm one of the spiritual support volunteers here, and I wanted to check in with you.
You look terrified.
Really?
Well, that's what
You know,
I said.
I'm sorry, I do feel a little scared. I'm new to this. I guess I am maybe a little more terrified than I thought I was.
I'm trying to remember what the patient said next because we got over that fairly quickly. But yeah, my immediate response was the same. Really? I look terrified?
So the key is to be a real person and honest and you're not a salesman. You're not faking it to make it. So any other thoughts? I'm aware of the time, so I want to give as much time as possible for the roundtable. Any other thoughts as far as this presentation today?
I found it a really good summary of the process that I find myself having fallen into.
Good.
Garrett, I find it's helpful always to just be reminded and have a refresher, and keep it sort of top of mind, and also to sort of echo an earlier sentiment of being able to gather with you all and have a sense of community and safety, if you will, to be vulnerable. Really appreciate that.
Great. Yeah, we need one another, and we all have similar feelings at times, different ones at times too. Helene, were you going to say something? Did I see that? Or okay, anybody else? Oh, Maureen, you have your hand up, and you're muted.
I think she said no.
Okay.
Did not have my hand up.
Okay, well, we can further talk, but I'm going to turn it over to Joy now and just be a participant. So thank you all for your engagement and your sharing. And it is really cool that we can come from very different perspectives, spiritually, faith backgrounds, and yet our commonality is very significant. So thank you for what you're doing.
So thank you, Garrett. I think that was an excellent